In this episode of Threat and Theory, we tackle one of the most misunderstood questions in geopolitics right now: why Iran isn't at the tipping point yet. Every surge of protest, every crackdown, every spike in regional tension gets labeled as Phase 3, but that instinct somehow misses how regimes actually fail. Today we break down what late Phase 2C really looks like, why repression alone doesn't signal collapse, and how Iran's ideological structure makes compromise nearly impossible. We also unpack why diplomacy and military posture are moving in parallel, how October 7th exposed Iran's deterrence architecture, and why the most dangerous moments often come before obedience breaks, not after. Iran isn't collapsing, but the scaffolding is under stress. The off-ramps are narrowing, and from here, the tipping point is finally visible. Welcome to Threat and Theory, where intelligence meets insight, hosted by a veteran of the U.S. intelligence community. We cut past the headlines to show you the world as it actually unfolds. A place where threats are examined before they're obvious, and theory is used to understand what pressure, power, and intent are really doing beneath the surface. Every episode breaks down complex geopolitics, tradecraft, hidden dynamics, emerging technologies, and the human element behind global events. It's like learning chess for the geopolitical world of today. Discover how intelligence actually shapes the world, not through secrets, but through clarity. You're listening to Threat and Theory. Let's begin. So let's start with the thing people keep getting wrong. Every time protests flare up, every time we see repression, every time there's external pressure, people jump straight to, this is it, this is the tipping point, this is time.
Right, and that instinct is understandable.
Yeah.
But again, we look at indicators, right? So again, Phase 2C, which is where we're at, is about the people. Phase 2C is where we've been for weeks now. We've seen the protests. We've seen the institutions pressing against the regime. But what we haven't seen is the tipping point. And what is the tipping point? Well, Phase 3 is about, can the regime still rely on obedience, and specifically obedience of the levers of coercion? And that hasn't yet happened.
So where are we actually sitting right now then?
So again, Phase 2C right now is hardened. I mean, the regime no longer enjoys any real legitimacy among the population. Among the international community, we've seen Europe now declare the IRGC a terrorist organization. Never happened before. Domestically, we've seen teachers starting to list the number of students dead. We've seen the lawyers starting to push back. But again, these are not the levers of oppression. And as long as the IRGC, as long as the Basij, as long as the folks who hold the guns remain with the regime, then the regime stays in power.
Mm-hmm. And what is ultimately going to be the cause of those things not to hold the guns in the same direction anymore?
You know, it's really unpredictable. I like to go by history, and you go back to 1980 in Poland. And in 1980 in Poland, you had the Solidarity movement against the Soviet regime, and it lasted for months. Protests, riots in the streets, general strike, and it had staying power. And we kept waiting, and it never materialized. And eventually normalcy resumed. And then 9 years later, in Leipzig, Germany, you had what they called the Montagsdemonstration, or the Monday demonstration. And here, this was on October 9th, 1989. And suddenly the local constabulary, the SVA and the Stasi of the East German secret police did not fire on the protesters. They did not react on the orders to suppress the people. And that was phase 3. Within a month, the Berlin Wall fell. And with that, the Iron Curtain fell.
Wow. So
and it really comes down to as simple as a flick of the switch.
So if we slow down on that for a minute, we take a moment just to focus on that point in time. Can you give me some education on that?
Yeah, it's almost impossible to predict. When does it happen? And it's, in solidarity, in a lot of ways, it was larger protests, more pressure on the regime. But in 1989, for whatever reasons, the conditions were ripe and it just didn't happen. It was only a 70,000 person protest in Leipzig, East Germany. In Poland, in Gdansk, Poland, and the shipyards, there were much larger protests.
Yeah. So it's really not, it's just not public support.
Yeah, it was just the regimes the levers of oppression decided wir sind die Volk, we are the people.
So why is Iran different?
Well, right now Iran is different because Iran is different because they have identified themselves in opposition to the U.S. since their inception. They have identified themselves in zealotry and confrontation. That is their legitimacy. And that makes it almost impossible for them to compromise. It makes it impossible for them to compromise internally, and it makes it impossible for them to compromise externally. And so you have a situation where they cannot reform, and so they cannot satisfy the demands of the protesters, which makes it impossible for them to regain legitimacy internally, right? So they can only now govern by terror. And at the same time, they cannot compromise externally. And so we have the situation where today is February 4th, and tomorrow negotiations are going to begin in Muscat, Oman, between the United States and Iran. Iran has very uncompromising negotiation stance. And the United States has a much more expansive set of negotiating principles. Iran is saying, we will not negotiate on what you intend to negotiate on. And these negotiations are almost set to fail from the beginning, based on what Iran is declaring that they'll negotiate on.
Yeah.
And what the United States intends to negotiate on. Just like you might as well be talking from two different sheets of music. Not even two different sheets of music. You might as well be talking from classical to punk rock.
Gotcha.
And so the United States, and the way to think about what's really going on with these negotiations tomorrow is the United States is going there not for the purpose of talking to Iran. The United States is going there to say they're really addressing the Gulf states. They're saying, look, we're making the efforts to engage in diplomacy with Iran, and Iran just isn't going to play ball. And we're doing everything we can. We're doing the pro forma, negotiations, and Iran's just not going to be compromising. Let us use your airspace in your airfields because this is ridiculous. And Iran is basically doing the pro forma, we're trying to be reasonable, but we're not really.
Yeah.
And, Iran's got this mixture of perpetual victimhood. And by the way, we're going to continue to kill whoever we want to. It's a very, like I said, they've defined themselves from confrontation since the beginning. And you could go down the list. You go from Beirut, in the 1980s. You go to Khobar Towers in the 1990s. You go to the roadside bombs that they were giving to, that they were helping to manufacture against us in Iraq. Their entire reason for legitimacy has been confrontation. And Hezbollah is an Iranian manufactured proxy army. Everything about Iran has been anti-Western, anti-U.S., anti-Israel. They call us the Great Satan. They call Israel the Little Satan. And everything about them has been just contra U.S. And that's how they define their legitimacy.
So do they agree to sit and negotiate because it's the optics of them with other allied countries of their own, or where do these negotiations always break down in the same place?
They're more or less, if anything, talking to Europe, because Europe has always been their hedge, and now Europe is no longer their hedge.
Gotcha. So how does this affect diplomacy?
So it makes genuine diplomacy impossible. Iran says they want to only negotiate nukes. U.S. says it wants to negotiate nukes, proxies, missiles, which are important to our partners in the region, including the Gulf states and Israel, as well as Iran's treatment of its people. Iran wants nothing of that. They want very limited and specific negotiating principles, and that's not acceptable to us. So in this latest round of talks, it's the regime can't give ground without hollowing itself out. And the reason it can't hollow itself out is because to do that, it would, among other things, require the IRGC to be held accountable. And the IRGC holds the guns in Iran.
Gotcha. So oftentimes people get confused by diplomacy and military posture.
Right.
Can you give a little insight into that?
So they see that as a contradiction. It's not. It's synchronization. Iran and the U.S. cannot even agree on the discussion items. That tells me that these negotiations are not intended to succeed. Quite honestly, I would argue that the U.S. is not participating with the intention of them succeeding. Neither is Iran. They're not about success. They're about the U.S. needs to demonstrate to our regional allies that we're going through the motions, and Iran needs to demonstrate to both Europe and to its domestic audience that it's doing the same.
So if the U.S. were to make strategic military action right now, prior to having these diplomatic discussions or negotiations, that would just not look as good. So this is, are you saying that this becomes a checkbox, and we go, hey, we tried this, we tried to negotiate, they still didn't work. Now we get to elevate or escalate the response here?
This is our ticket to using Saudi airspace.
I see. So let's talk about a shock to the system. Why did October 7th happen?
So October 7th happened, quite honestly, because Iran saw an opening. They thought that Israel was vulnerable. Israel was having some domestic issues, and they thought this was the opportunity now. They had built this ring of fire, and this was their opportunity to finally see Israel done. Boy, did they misjudge. And in fact, what happened was that moment forced Iran's deterrence architecture into the open. The so-called ring of fire was tested under sustained pressure, and it
didn't work the way it was advertised.
It did not work under the way it was advertised. Hamas was rolled up. Hezbollah had a lot of bits and pieces blowed off under the pager attacks. The Houthis proved sustainable up until the time the missile took out most of the leadership. The Syrian government was overthrown by al-Shara and his folks, and that was a huge blow to Iran. And then the 12-day war happened, and the Israeli Air Force took apart the Iranian integrated air defense system, took apart most of their nuclear production capability, took apart most of their missile production capability, took out most of their IRGC leadership using drones launched from inside of Iran.
Wow.
Iran tries to portray that domestically as some sort of a victory. This was nothing close to a victory for Iran.
That sounds like a big shift.
They got their butts handed to them.
Yeah.
There's no dodging that one.
Yeah.
And their own people saw it. They had Israeli aircraft flying in daylight over Tehran day after day after day.
Yeah. So the regime is trapped at this point?
The regime has lost they lost a lot of legitimacy through that. They lost a lot of their legitimacy when they had the Ring of Fire rolled up. And so now they've lost their domestic legitimacy. And so what are they doing? Well, this is kind of their last stab at legitimacy is you strike out. You strike out at your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And really the one weapon that they have that's effective, and that proved effective during the 12-day war, were the ballistic missiles. Now, it's not an effective military weapon, mind you. What it is it's an effective terror weapon. It has no military value unless the military value is terrorizing a bunch of civilians, as many civilians as you can. Not a real military target, but it's kind of like if you enjoy killing as many people as you can, that's all it can. They're not accurate. They're what we call area weapons. They hit they have a circular area of probability measured in kilometers, and so you launch them at a city. And they hit a city, and maybe they'll usually hit an apartment building or something, and they kill people.
Yeah, but no accuracy to determine who you're killing and who you aren't killing.
No, if you're aiming at an airbase, you'll probably hit somewhere on the airbase.
Mm-hmm.
The Israelis, with their Iron Dome and their David Sling, can intercept most of them. But Iran will probably launch as many as they can, and they'll try to inundate the air defenses.
Yeah.
And that's, terrifying if you're Israel. And what the first thing, if we launch against Iran has stated that they'll turn this into a regional war. Wow. And that terrifies the Gulf neighbors.
Yeah.
That's why the Gulf states are not eager for us to strike Iran.
Yeah.
If you're in UAE and you have beautiful Dubai there, last thing you want is the Burj Khalifa, the largest building in the world, targeted by Iranian missiles.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying they're heading to war with a power that they can't defeat?
Yeah, that's the danger. And of course, once the first bomb drops, it becomes unpredictable. Of course, for the United States, but it really becomes unpredictable for Iran. Typically, in a situation like this, everybody hunkers around the flagpole and the nationalism kicks in. I don't know that that happens in this case for Iran. There's so little legitimacy left in that regime that that's very unlikely to happen in this case, it seems. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a very unpredictable situation domestically for Iran if that happens.
Yeah. So talking about the phases of the escalation of phases, can we be really clear before kind of where we're at, I guess, before people run ahead?
Yes. We're not in phase 3.
Okay. And
there's no guarantee that when the first bomb drops, that puts us in phase 3.
Yeah.
Again, we're in phase 2C. The institutions now have turned against the government, or many of them have. You have celebrities, sports heroes sitting it out. They're saying, we've had enough of this. You've had, the lawyers are now turning against it. You have the medical community turning against it. You have the teachers now speaking out. Obviously, the university students have had enough. But the levers of oppression remain with the government. If that first bomb drops, it remains unpredictable. It does not mean that the IRGC turns against the government. It does not mean that the Artesh. Now, what's the Artesh? That's the regular army. Two different things. Iran has two different militaries. The Artesh, The Artesh defends the nation. The IRGC defends the regime. Two different things.
Yeah.
And so does the regular army turn against the regime? Or defend the regime? Does the Iranian Air Force launch? Does the Iranian Navy sortie? Does the Iranian army go out there and fight? Chances are, I would imagine that if we target anybody, we will not target regular Army and regular Navy and regular Air Force targets other than air defense targets.
Okay.
What we will target is IRGC and IRGC Navy targets and IRGC Air Force targets.
Yeah.
These are the things that are associated with the regime, not the nation.
Okay. So phase 2C still sounds pretty dangerous then.
Phase 2C is, think of it as you have a pile of very dry timber, and you're holding a match, but you haven't struck the match yet.
Gotcha. So, the takeaway.
Iran is not racing towards war because it wants war. It's racing towards war because the legitimacy model that has propped it up for 48 years no longer works. Internally or externally, quite honestly. And the illusions that once masked that reality have left it. So phase 3, the tipping point, comes when obedience breaks. And right now, we're just not there yet. But from where we're standing, we can see it.
Yeah. The scaffolding is crumbling.
It's crumbling.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for educating us and bringing us up to speed on what's happening in Iran. Thanks again for tuning into Threat and Theory. We're going to continue to tackle topics like this, and if you've got other things that you'd like us to talk about here, we're all ears. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.